Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My apologies for not having been able to do a video sooner. Some of you may know, others may not. I had the misfortune to finally, after 4 years, if I may call it so, catch COVID. And it wasn't a very nice experience, thankfully, unlike so many. I'm still alive, I'm still around. I do not have long COVID, but it wasn't a nice experience. This being said, and going back to business, because I'm a very straightforward individual, what I would like to talk to you all about today is charities and how you can put together a PR strategy for a charity. How can you go and support charities with your PR knowledge or experience or expertise or a set of particular skills? But today's video, or shall we say masterclass, if I may call it so, is about the broad public relations strategy and strategies that we could associate with charities. This being said, all of us know that most charities' public relations and marketing spend is limited, and that there is only that much budget they can allocate to bringing specialized support on board to help them. People like you, people like me, people like many other. We are not cheap, and for someone to afford us, for a charity to afford us, generally we lend our support when we truly believe in the purpose and mission of that charity. I've done so several times in the past because the charities I supported were very, very close to my heart. However, what most charities should have is the structure of a public relations strategy on which they can build and feed into according to the various activities they undertake, because they do very different things. Tried and tested with several charities I worked with in the past, as I was mentioning, is a structure I recommend you followed. The first point we're going to speak about is the strategy rationale. In other words, what is it that you are trying to achieve? For instance, and this is just an example, of course, you should say that while there are several or not charities dealing with our area of practice, there are very few who deal with this particular aspect of it because, question mark, and you introduce your own charity's specialism or what sets them apart. Do not lie, do not make things up. Every charity should have a unique selling proposition. Find what yours is and make it very clear. The second point that you have to be mindful of is the strategy component. And I've put together a non-exhaustive list of what your charity may need. This list is, of course, as I just said, non-exhaustive. You can add to it, you can take away from it, etc. But it gives you an idea of what these components are. You want to increase its public visibility. You want to build upon its social enterprise model. You want to attract more volunteers. You want to reach out to a significant number of, and in brackets, put your target group, or you want to reach out to a significant number of individuals or animals or whatever at risk of becoming, and here you put in brackets your target group conditions. You may want to expand your donor pool. You may want to improve your relation with the authorities, local councils and boroughs, central government, international donors, celebrities, etc. You want to build an increasing number of partnerships. For instance, reciprocal representation with other charities or corporations. You want to attract free media coverage. You want to improve your stakeholder communication with donors, with charities, with government, with local authorities, with volunteers, with the general public, with the media. A third step, critical of course, because that's where the implementation component usually gets some of us, or most of us, is related to the strategy steps or tactics. Here, you have to do just that. Where do you start and what do you start with? What are your first steps? First, you need to identify your target group or your target groups. You just can't go broad and wide, just like a fisherman hoping to catch a fish and hope that someone will come and say how amazing you are, or here's a check for £10,000 or dollars or whatever. You need to research your target group's engagement pattern carefully. Then you need to refine the messages you are going to engage them with, and you need to identify the channels and the tools or techniques you should be using in targeting them. Because keep in mind something, while social media is common these days for corporations, individuals, and charities alike, if you send a tweet or if you tag someone, i.e. an organization you would wish to support your charity's goals, that doesn't mean that's going to happen. Often it requires your CEO to go and sit down with their charity or stakeholder engagement director or whoever in that organization is in charge of volunteering projects or other similar opportunities. You need to start small and end big. Understand that measuring your impact and activity every step of the way is critical. And then you have to refine what you've done and what didn't go well as well as you expected and make it better. Remember, a public relations work plan is a work in progress from the moment it starts, and it needs constant revision. Then the fourth part, which pretty much we've merged into from the previous point, is the one related to your outputs and outcomes. The outputs and outcomes of your strategy should always be dictated by your objective, never the other way around. What is it that you want to achieve and why? What is the direct result of what you did? In other words, that's the output. And what changed following that result? That is your outcome. The want to achieve will provide you with a clear target. That's our final destination. The why to achieve it will be the actual organizational impact that your strategy should have, providing, of course, they are both realistic. So be very pragmatic with what it is that you are trying to achieve and why you want to achieve it. The fifth point that matters is the one related to public visibility and public awareness. Given that PR campaigns, or PR campaign funds to be more specific, available to charities do not always take priority and are in most cases substantially scarce, your charity's public awareness and visibility steps may choose to focus on, again, a non-exhaustive list, use of social media, word of mouth, testimonials, newsletters, events, designated ambassadors, constant website updates, blogs, press releases, volunteers, dedicated mailing lists, know your GDPR very well, partnerships with other charities, etc. Each charity has its own engagement style, one that has to be very carefully chosen if it hadn't been already. So you need to come up with everything that suits your charity, that suits your organization. It's not a copy-paste exercise because, for instance, what works for Oxfam doesn't work for RSPCA. or doesn't work for Save Soil or Save the Planet or Greenpeace or whatever. So you are different. Each charity is different. And keep in mind that you are going to be competing in a very crowded space. Everyone wants something from someone, irrespective of the true purpose or the goals or the beauty of what it is they're trying to achieve. There's only that much spare funds in everyone's pocket that they can allocate to charities. Is yours at the top of mind? That's how you need to think. Think of everything as a potential donor to your charity. Then a lot of scattered pieces on your board will fall into place. And how would you use those direct engagement methods or channels or whatever that I mentioned earlier is entirely up to you. Only you know what shape your content will have and how powerful and meaningful it can be. The sixth point and the last one that I would like to bring to your attention is the one related to stakeholder communication. Pretty much everything needs to be perfect when it comes to this. Apart from the detailed steps that I mentioned earlier in the public visibility or public awareness, there are several other key aspects to be considered when seeking to improve or expand your stakeholders' front of mind, such as we would call the brand. A strong brand is invaluable to you. As I was mentioning earlier, the battle for charity sponsors or donors is harder than ever. It's important to spend time in researching, defining, and building your charity's brand. Your brand as a charity is the promise you make to your stakeholders, and it is the bedrock of any meaningful stakeholder communication. Is your image portraying what it should? What is your image conveying to your stakeholders? Are you maximizing upon the value you bring to the society? Are you highlighting your contribution to issues of social, public, educational, or national interest? We know all too well that stakeholders are different. Their interests, vested or not, are different. Their drivers are different, and their perception is different. As such, each category of your stakeholders, as mentioned before, needs to be assessed and dealt with after you carefully performed their identification. In other words, who they actually are. Their classification. In other words, are they small, medium, or big? Their analysis. In other words, how important are they to us and for us? Impact. How can they impact us and our activity? This is much more, what I'm talking about here is much more than a conventional stakeholder mapping, which for the part of most organizations is a very transactional exercise. As a charity, the role or the job that you have to do is much more complex because the transactional part of your stakeholder communication helps you exist, survive, do good things. But the most important part of it is the emotional component attached to everything that you do. So allow me to go back to what I was saying. You also need to perform an analysis of their engagement, i.e., how can you engage with them faster, better? Their motivation. What would motivate them to engage with us? Remember something, and I said it several times in the past. It's not about you, it's about them. In other words, put yourself, everything that you do, everything that you say, needs to be analyzed from the standpoint of your recipient, the person who receives your message, your approach, your targeted marketing efforts, or whatever. You need to answer this question on their behalf before you do anything. What's in it for me and why should I do it? In other words, what would motivate them to engage with us? Why? Why would they do it? Answer that question, and then you might have a very, very good chance to get them on board. And the final point I would like to make is the one related to resistance. What makes them resist engaging with you, and how can you overcome this? In other words, if, let's say, I'm the public relations advisor, director, very important, head of comms, you name it, of a private business, a profit-making organization, and your charity comes to me to ask us for funds. So the first thing that I have to do in my role, in my profit-making organization, is to perform a risk assessment on you, on your charity. In other words, if we publicly say that we are going to be supporting your charity for 5 months, 1 year, whatever, what is the impact of that that's going to have on my employer or on my client if I were an external advisor or anything else? So resistance is a very important point. Do your homework and be ready to have answers to any questions, or be ready to overcome any barriers, because barriers will be many, but your ability to jump over these hurdles and, shall we say, allay everyone's fears or doubts about you is going to be a matter of make or break your fundraising efforts. Many of the suggestions I made so far apply to a variety of organizational public relations strategies, not just to charities, of course. But these simple steps should help you, regardless of your experience in public relations or communication. They should help you have a solid starting in what it is you are trying to achieve. My only advice is to never start any actions, in other words, steps or tactics, as we would call them, before you do your research properly and before you learn from every step you take. Remember, charitable work is all about impact and emotion. If you can't prove impact and do so emotively, your fundraising efforts, any of your fundraising efforts, are going to suffer terribly. And always, always be just a donor to your charity. In other words, if I saw this advert, or if I read this message, or this article, or whatever, would this make me donate? If your answer is less than yes, you have to be very realistic here. If your answer is no, that's a tragedy. If your answer is perhaps, then you have to go back to the drawing board and do some more work. But if your answer is yes, then you cracked it, as we would say. If you can, and if you have the budget to run a formal focus group, if you don't have the budget, I would strongly suggest to use your circle of friends, family, peers, There are many of us in this industry who are more than willing to help free of charge, of course. I would make sure that you run every single thing you want to put out there past some other individuals who have a neutral position, or individuals who have no reason to take you in either direction, i.e., to say yes or to say no or whatever. Just test, pilot, beta test, as we would call it most of the times. And then you have a very good chance of doing the right thing. Thank you very much. I hope you're going to be successful. I have absolutely no doubt that you will. And do keep me posted with regard to your wins, with regard to your woes, with regard to your efforts of running a spectacular public relations strategy and whatever campaign may follow from that. Thank you.